once I got this mounted, the very next thing to do is go ahead and drill out the water pump. So it is the day after Christmas, and I am back in the garage continuing the install of the single turbo kit on the Trailblazer. I want to show you guys the progress that I've made thus far, along with some issues that I ran into. So let's start with, I guess I'll start over here. So the first issue I ran into, I think I already talked about it, but when you mount this manifold, this valve cover here, the cap is very, very close to it. So what I decided to do was, well, there was a plan to tap like the side of this valve cover here. And then I got to looking at another passenger side valve cover. When I flipped it over here, I realized that I could just go ahead and put a, I think this is a 10 or 12 AN fitting on here. It's a straight shot into there, nice and tight. I reused the same gasket, got another nut from the inside, tightened it, and basically what's going to happen is it's going to act as two things. Well, I also took out the baffle from the inside of the valve cover, so it's going to act as two. It's going to have two purposes. One of them is going to be where I'm going to fill the oil up, and the other one is going to be I'm going to have a 90 coming off of this, and it's going to be going to a catch can. So it'll be a 90 to a catch can, and it'll intercept that guy back there, and then this will be plugged. And then when it's not a catch can, I'll just unscrew it to put oil in there. Kind of a pain in the butt, but it's something that is fairly simple to do, and I don't have to worry about melting stuff. This cap is here, just I ordered it because I wasn't thinking ahead, and I thought that, I don't know what I thought, but anyway. The other issue you're going to run into is this guy here. So I already bent mine to accommodate the log style manifold. I don't remember if it would have came up through here, through the center, but either way, I think I would have gone and bent it this way regardless, because this plastic handle, I know it's probably heat resistant, but it would have been between, if you can imagine the downpipe goes this way, it would have been basically cooking between the downpipe and the manifold the entire time. At least here, it's a little bit away. I can still pull it out, and I might make a small little shield around, as well as wrap this manifold to try to get some heat off of that. So those are the two issues that I ran into on this side. Now we go back here, and let me get some light. Okay, this is a little bit better. All right, now we go back here, and you have these two hoses that run into your heater core, and the original attachment, one of mine actually broke, so I was going to have to redo this anyway. But essentially, these things come out straight. They shoot out, and then, like, I think in the stock configuration, they come out this way, and the other one, like, swings around that way and goes in. When you run this manifold in this downpipe, unless you come out and do a fender exit, I don't see a way how you can possibly keep those, the stock connectors. I think they're also plastic, but I'll say you can keep them and not melt stuff. So what I had to do was I ended up, there's two nipples that come out of the firewall. One's like a 1/2 inch, one's a 3/4 inch. I cut them up to the bump, and I took two 90-degree, I'm sure you can find something better, but I figured I went and got two 90-degree brass water fittings, and I trimmed the water brass fittings another like 1/4 inch so they get closer to the firewall, and then I just connected them with the coolant hose. Put two clamps, one on the 90-degree elbow, one on the nipple coming out of the firewall for both, and I routed them up. and they'll go around this way underneath the cold side. This will have a blanket on it, and these guys kind of tuck further away from this hot side, and they go right down to the water pump. Now, obviously, if you're not really concerned with having heat, you don't have to do this. Obviously, I want to make my car, this will be a street-driven car, daily driver, so it's definitely going to need to have heat and air conditioning, but I'll get to that in a future video. So that was the issue I ran into that. I got through it. If I put the downpipe on, which I'll show you guys after I do, you have maybe a 1/4 inch here. And I mean, it's pretty tight. It looks like there's a lot of room, but once that 4-inch downpipe comes in, it eats up a lot of the space. So I think that's all I could think of. Oh, one more thing that you guys may want to be on the lookout for. When you route this drain tube, make sure that you check down there what it could be rubbing on. And you may have to trim some stuff down there. I ended up trimming one of the bolts that holds, like the end of the bolt that holds the engine mount on. I'll try to remind you guys on that in an earlier video so you don't get to this point and have to take everything apart. But it's somewhat, I don't know, it's somewhat questionable if you leave it there, because the hose almost gets pinched. It almost like funnels the hose to where it's getting pinched. And if you have any movement in the block, maybe not, you know, right away, but eventually, I imagine that's gonna, you know, tear into the hose, and then, you know, you'll develop a slow leak, and obviously we'll have to remediate that. All right, so the other part I ran into is when I was doing this front mount setup here, you have to get rid of this crash bar here. Not a big fan of that, but it is what it is. So this thing mounts with these little brackets up here, and then I'm going to tack weld them here once I get it all finalized. But the bigger issue is you have these sensors for your airbag deployment. Don't just leave those sitting off to the side. Safety in mind, you want to make sure that these do get mounted somewhere in the front so they can deploy an airbag in case of something happening. So what I did was I went on the inside of this support here, just sitting above this loom here. Sorry, lost for words. I went ahead and just put it down, scribed the holes, tapped them, and then, well, drilled them, tapped them, and then just secured these down. So it looks like it's going to clear. It's pretty good. So we'll see how that works out. Additionally, you'll have one of these guys, which you can do what I just did over here, but you can still use this guy. I didn't end up using this guy because my truck actually came with an external transmission cooler. I'm not going to use this one. I'm going to use a different one for my transmission. So I reused this one, moved it off to the side, and ran hoses to the power steering reservoir, and then the line coming off of the steering rack. So for the line, let's see if I can get you guys closer. For the line coming off the steering rack, it's an aluminum line, and it'll stop right to here, and you'll have like a crush fitting to a hose. I cut the line off there and then put this line on, and then secured it down with a clamp. So I'm running both hoses. They basically go under the computer. They go around the side, come up by the rail. This is it, and they make a nice radius into this cooler. There's no chance of them kinking or something impeding the flow of the steering fluid. So that's basically everything that I ran into thus far. The other things that I have to work out still is the coil packs on the passenger side, which if you look on Huron Speed's website on the installation is, it's a guide, so it doesn't have, I don't know, it kind of gives you pictures that you can get ideas from, but it's not like super clear. So I'm gonna have to play around with where I can go ahead and fit these coil packs to get them away from here, because obviously you're not going to be able to put your coil packs there without frying them. So that's basically it. Oh, here we go. So here's another issue I ran into. I know you guys are thinking, why is this here? It's not supposed to be there. So when I mounted the intercooler, and it's not really a way to screw it up. This is on their website. You basically put the bracket to the side over here, and then it just kind of hangs, right? And then you only have so much space here, so it's not like you can position thing wherever you want. So I positioned it in a pretty good location, centered it, the whole 9 yards. I put this pipe on, and it was off by quite a bit. I'm sure if I like stretched it to the max, or maybe not, I don't know. But maybe if I would have stretched it to the max, basically pull this coupler all the way down, pull this pipe almost all the way to the end of the coupler, and pulled this all the way out and angled here and here, that I could have had enough engagement to connect this pipe, but at a certain point in time, I'm sure it would have blown off. So what I did was I went ahead and kind of played around with it. And what I realized was, if I cut the pipe here and I just pull it apart by 1.5 inches, I can engage everything like very, very comfortably. If you've done intercooler piping for a long time and you've blown off a bunch of them, you kind of have a pretty good idea what's going to work, what's not going to work. I'm pretty comfortable with this, where I have full engagement on everything. When I clamp stuff down, it's not at a weird angle. It's behind the hump. It has enough bite onto the couplers. This is what I feel comfortable with. So that left me with this gap. So I went ahead and ordered just a 3-inch coupler that I'm going to go ahead and put here. It'll give another cushion or bending point or what have you, whatever you want to call it, for when the entire motor is just barely moving. There's going to be movement in this intercooler pipe. Not a big fan of adding another potential failure point, but to me this is less risky than trying to stretch this thing all the way out. And I think that is all that I have. Other than that, it's going pretty good. Oh, check this out. So I also ended up putting a 4-corner steam port on this block because the LS2 comes with the front and the backs are plugged. So when I had one of these laying around, I put it on, and if you look here, I mean, it just barely cleared the back of the bracket that holds the alternator and the pulleys that align the belt. I had to bend the nipple of the steam port up just a little bit, and then I have this little hose coming off. I'm going to go ahead and use some extra, whatever that is, 1/4 inch piping or 3/8, whatever that is. I'm going to go ahead and make it out to here and then vent it or put it wherever it needs to go. But it is possible to put that guy on. And I think that is it. So the car is coming back together nicely. Everything's almost mounted. I got the crossover here cut out so the intercooler will fit. Got this side taken care of. Still waiting on the intercooler pipe that I'm going to use for this upper area here. While I wait on that, I got to take care of the overflow tank. So one of the issues that you have when you install a giant turbo and use this kit is the downpipe comes down this part of the engine bay, and this is where your overflow tank is. So car can't really run without an overflow tank. Well, it probably can, won't run for very long, but ultimately what I decided to do is I ordered one of these guys online. They're very, very cheap, and I ordered the cylindrical one because anything else that I found online that was relatively inexpensive couldn't really tuck here. because you have so much space. Plus I'm going to use the area back there for the air conditioning condenser or whatever that thing is called. So that's going to sit there, so I can't really put anything in that area. So I opted for the 12-inch, 3-inch diameter. I think it's maybe a liter or so, that can actually fit right next to the radiator here. Let's see if I can just show you guys. It fits right down there. I can mount it to the side. I can post it on the... I can basically run a metal beam from here up and then post this guy on there with the tabs. It'll be right next to the turbo. It'll be out of the way, close to this little guy there, that guy. So the only issue that comes along with going this route is these tubes here are small. So they're like 1/4 of an inch, and that's maybe a 3/8 or yeah, like a 3/8. So trying to get a hose stuck on that and on this and keeping it together is kind of difficult. So what I'm gonna do is, you have a pipe here that goes through this guy and it stops like right here, and basically once this overflow tank is filled up to that point, this is where the coolant comes out from. This guy here is basically stops at the bottom here, and that's where your coolant will overflow into. So the way it works is coolant comes into this shorter guy here, fills it up till about right there, and then from there on the coolant gets exhausted through the longer guy here or sucked back into the system. So that's how this thing works. So the remedy to that is I am going to go ahead and cut this guy off. If you look inside, which I'd show you, but you can't really see anything, but if you can imagine, this is just orbital welded on the inside here. So the moment you cut it here, there's nothing else that sticks out further in here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it and drill it out so it's slightly larger. And I'm going to go ahead and use this guy to put in here, and then put the hose on this guy, run it to the radiator, and then put a washer and some RTV at the bottom here, or maybe like an O-ring or something to seal it so coolant doesn't drop. That was basically the only way I could get everything put together without waiting another week for parts to come in. The other thing that also has to be done is I don't have an area for my steam port to hook up to, so I don't have a one of these guys, one of the nipples on the radiator here for the steam port to go back into. So I'm gonna have to tap the water pump there, which kind of sucks because I already put majority of it back together, so I got to figure out how I'm gonna do that. But that's the only other thing that's outstanding here. Well, here's the finished product. I tapped the bottom of this and went ahead and put a 90 on here. I was slightly mistaken about the thickness of this cylinder as far as the gauge of steel. It's actually pretty thick. It's kind of hard to drill through. I actually didn't even tap it. All I did was drill it to the size of the fitting, or just slightly under, and I just went ahead and screwed it in, and it bites pretty good. I couldn't really get it to spin anymore after that. I was starting to deform the entire bottle, so that's not going anywhere. So that's what it looks like now. I'm reusing this stock hose that came with the truck. I'm going to go ahead and install it before I cut this hose. I'm going to go ahead and get the angles correct so I don't have any collapsed hoses, and then cut the rest off, and that'll take care of this guy. Once I got this mounted, the very next thing to do is go ahead and drill out the water pump and then tap it for a barb. I started drilling. I figured I'd explain what's going on here. So I got this barb. Go ahead and I'll thread it in there and I'll just loop it back around into this guy, which is my 4-port steam setup. So the biggest thing I guess here is to make sure that none of these shavings, or as few of these shavings as possible, make it into the water pump. So I'm going to go ahead and use lots of oil on the drill bit. Oh, here's the finished product. Retrospectively, I probably should have done this outside of the car. Gets a little dicey after you get done drilling out the water pump and tapping it, if there's any metal shavings in there. The trick to that is, I don't have any here, but essentially you take some thick viscosity oil. You could probably do it with regular oil. Take some Q-tips, and if you've ever, for whatever reason, done that, everything sticks to the tip of that Q-tip, especially when you roll it. Metal that's very, very sharp will definitely get stuck in there. So I just basically went in there till I saw 2 to 3 cotton swabs that didn't have any metal particulates in there. They look very, very clean. So there it is, tapped. I'm gonna go ahead and run the hose to here. I don't have any of this hose. I don't have any of that hose. I got to figure out what I can use. I might have to run to the parts store. But that's done. Throw the throttle body back on, and we will continue on with putting the rest of this thing back together. So here it is, hooked up. Everything's ready to go now. Put the belt back on, hooked everything up in the front. I'm starting to work on the underneath the crossover pipe. Then we'll do the down pipe here and then tidy everything up over here, and I'll be ready to start.